In a remote, hushed woodland, an elderly woman was quietly splitting logs. Only the sound of the axe's thump reverberated through the trees. All around, the dense forest loomed, wrapped in an eerie stillness, as though the very woods were holding their breath, observing the moment unfold. Concealed behind the foliage, a young man stood in silence, his eyes brimming with curiosity and unease. However, the old woman remained engrossed in her labor, oblivious to his presence. Once she had gathered all the chopped wood, she lifted the bundle onto her back and trudged along a narrow, enigmatic pathway. With each stride, the soft creak of wood and the muffled sound of her footsteps resonated through the trees, while the young man held his breath, attentively watching. As she neared his hiding spot, he finally called out, "Shall I assist you in carrying the logs?" Without uttering a word, the old woman handed him the bundle and continued walking. Taken aback, the young man hesitated momentarily but then trailed behind her. They ventured deeper into the forest, flanked by towering trees, twisted vines, and an ominous silence. Suspicion began to creep into the young man's heart as he observed the woman's peculiar behavior, yet he continued to follow her without question. Eventually, the old woman came to a halt. Before her stood an ancient wall draped in lush, green moss. Embedded within its surface was a decaying, time-worn door, sending a strange, ominous sensation coursing through the young man's chest. "Place the logs here. Then leave. And remember, do not glance back as you go. That would not end well for you," the old woman instructed. As recompense for his help, she bestowed upon him a luminous, radiant pearl. Once certain the young man had departed, the old woman began to murmur an incantation and advanced toward the door. It groaned as it creaked open, and she stepped inside. However, the young man had not left. As soon as she disappeared, he began to scale the wall. Though the moss-covered stones were slippery, he carefully maneuvered his hands and feet, ascending with caution. Upon reaching the top, he peered into the enclosed space and beheld a mesmerizing sight. A magnificent garden sprawled before him. Towering, golden sunflowers swayed under the warm sunlight, their petals gleaming. Scattered across the verdant grass were more of the same radiant pearls that the old woman had given him. Suddenly, his gaze fell upon a breathtaking young woman seated within the garden. Her long, silky tresses cascaded down her back, and her face radiated with an ethereal glow akin to moonlight. However, she was sobbing bitterly, and instead of ordinary tears, luminous white pearls streamed from her eyes, forming a small heap around her. The entire garden shimmered with these exquisite pearls, casting a golden hue upon the sunflowers. The young man approached her and gently asked why she was weeping. Through her sorrow, she revealed that she was a princess who had been abducted as a child by a wicked sorceress, who coveted the priceless pearls that fell from her eyes. The sorceress had imprisoned her in this hidden sanctuary, collecting the pearls and later selling them in the marketplace. "Go to my kingdom, Faris. Present this pearl to my father, the king, so he may rescue me," she implored. The young man vowed to fulfill her request. Silently, he climbed back over the wall and stole away into the night. A resolute determination burned in his heart, to free the princess from the sorceress's grasp, regardless of the cost. The wealth of the pearls held no allure for him. His only purpose was to aid the princess. With unwavering resolve, he hastened toward her homeland. After many grueling days of travel, he finally arrived at the gates of a grand palace. For a moment, he was awestruck by its splendor but quickly steadied himself and stepped forward. In his hand, he carried the same glowing pearl the princess had entrusted to him. Bowing with deep reverence, he presented the pearl and relayed the princess's message. The king's eyes widened in disbelief. At first, he struggled to accept that his long-lost daughter was still alive. However, upon recognizing the rare pearl, the kind that only came from his daughter's sorrow, his heart swelled with joy. "Can it be true? My daughter is truly alive?" he asked, his voice quivering with emotion. The young man nodded. Without a moment's delay, the king summoned his elite soldiers and commanded in a thunderous voice, "Return my daughter to me within 3 days." His warriors sprang into action, and the young man led them through the treacherous journey back to the mysterious forest. There, concealed amid the tangled vines, stood the ancient wall with its enchanted doorway at the center. Taking a steady breath, the young man stepped forward and carefully recited the incantation he had heard the sorceress whisper. With a groan, the door swung open, revealing a dark and sinister chamber beyond. Inside, dim lanterns swung from the ceiling, casting flickering shadows upon the cold stone walls. Bundles of dried herbs dangled from the rafters, their pungent aroma thick in the air. In one corner, a massive cauldron bubbled with a viscous, green elixir. The sorceress loomed beside it, her sharp eyes gleaming. The young man declared boldly, "I have come to reclaim the princess." The sorceress curled her lips into a malicious grin and sneered, "You dare to seize what is mine? She belongs to me. Leave now, or suffer a fate most terrible." Undeterred, the young man stood his ground. "I fear nothing. The princess will be free," he asserted. The sorceress began chanting in an arcane tongue, her voice dripping with menace. A magical orb at the room's center blazed with an intense, blinding light. Swiftly, the young man grabbed a hefty stone and, with all his might, hurled it at the glowing sphere. As soon as it made contact, a deafening explosion rocked the chamber. The sorceress let out an agonized shriek before disintegrating into a wisp of smoke, vanishing into the ether. The soldiers swiftly set fire to her mystical tomes and artifacts, ensuring she could never return. The young man rushed to the chamber where the princess was imprisoned, threw open the door, and liberated her. As she beheld her rescuer, tears of gratitude welled in her eyes. Together, they returned to the palace. The king was overwhelmed with joy upon seeing his beloved daughter again and embraced her tightly. The citizens erupted into cheers, showering flower petals in celebration. At long last, the king had been reunited with his cherished child. Festivities filled the palace with laughter and merriment. The young man and the princess were wed in a grand ceremony, and he was crowned prince of the realm. Happiness radiated throughout the kingdom, and the two lived blissfully ever after.